I was promised I was going to speak after dinner. This would have been better for many reasons. You would be less hungry. I wouldn't have made the mistake of ordering a double at the reception. But here we are. And you know the famous line, I'm what stands between you and dinner, so I will try to, I won't say I'm going to try to keep this brief because I'm not, but I will try to keep it under control. How's that for a starting point? It's really terrific to be here. It is nice to see the word state on the agenda. It happens about once a decade, and that's how often I come. And I received this great paragraph about what I'm supposed to speak about. I hope you didn't read it, because I didn't either. What I really want to talk about, because I get to choose the title, it is, after all, an after-dinner talk, the light, airy topic that I'm sure you ask, the question that you ask at home every evening over the dinner table, is cooperative federalism possible in healthcare? I know. This is what I've heard this before. You're thinking. But seriously, I did think that it was time to ask the question, as we're thinking about the role of the states, where do they fit? And indeed, some of our best examples of social policy change come from what some have called cooperative federalism. That is, programs where there are contemporaneous changes in state and federal policy, sometimes local as well, and we're able to move the nation forward in ways that we wouldn't have been able to do otherwise. It's not a perfect example, but one that certainly comes to mind is welfare reform, where the federal government opened the door for tremendous amount of state flexibility, and it's broadly viewed as having been successful. The state children's health insurance program, probably a better and safer example, certainly, where the federal government created a framework and some funding, and states love it, and the federal government loves it, Democrats love it, Republicans love it. This is what we can do as a country when we set our mind to it. And so it seems to me it's worth asking whether we can have cooperative federalism in health care. If you think about the Affordable Care Act, the term cooperative federalism is probably not the first phrase that comes to mind. After all, half the states are suing to overturn the law. Cooperative, it's we'll think of the term broadly. But I really do want to ask the question with some seriousness and hopefully a little bit of levity. I am, Stuart, by the way, glad to know that I don't have to be at 100% because everyone else will be at 110. That does give me some comfort. But I thought I would ask whether or not cooperative federalism is possible, and whether or not what we seem to be seeing with the Affordable Care Act of this division of the country and polarization is inevitable, or whether there's some prospect for success. Now, this is the Princeton Economics Conference, and I was an economics undergraduate, so I think that's why I got in, even though I'm a lawyer. But when I think of an economics conference, I think of slides and charts, and so when I was asked, I started preparing all of these charts on state fiscal conditions, and then a week ago, finally, in Stuart's busy schedule, we were able to have a preparatory call, and he said, it's after dinner. There's not going to be a slides. So, Plan B. Well, we're not going to have slides, we're not going to have charts, but I know you all have your, trusty. So I am going to give the presentation, Is Cooperative Federalism Possible in Healthcare, in 10 tweets. Tweet number 1. Imagine a tweet on the screen. Tweet number 1. What's my hashtag? Yeah. Here, we can all hold it up. That's for the encore. Please, save that. Save that for the encore. Tweet number 1. Martians and governors. 2 perspectives on state health policy. A Martian dropped onto planet Earth might look at the Affordable Care Act and think, this is finally what states have been asking for. We're building up the Medicaid floor, which every state that's been serious about coverage expansions have done. We're simplifying and streamlining the insurance market, which is what the leading states have been doing. We're going to offer income-based subsidies. This is exactly what states think is the answer to improving the healthcare system. And look at the financing of all that coverage expansion under the Affordable Care Act. 95% of the cost paid for by the federal government. What could be wrong with that from a state perspective? It does seem, if you were just dropped onto planet Earth from Mars, that you would think this would be wildly popular. Or if you're from Vermont. Martians, Vermonters, and governors. 3 perspectives on state health policy. Now, cynics would say it's politics. The Republicans have built their future on undermining, on attacking Obamacare. But I don't think the Martians' perspective, as appropriate as it might be, is the only perspective we might want to think about. Take the governor's perspective. In 2008, state revenue starts to crash. The federal government in the Recovery Act comes in and says, we're going to save you. We're going to increase the match rate in Medicaid. And lo and behold, and I don't think most know this, and if I had a slide projector, I would show it to you, but state spending on Medicaid actually went down in the first 2 years of the economic downturn because the increased federal spending under the Recovery Act actually more than offset the increased cost of the program due to increased enrollment. But then we have all these new governors coming into office elected, and what do they see when they walk in the door? Well, in January of 2011, the federal government starts phasing out, and in June of 2011, they eliminate the enhanced match. And after having actually seen a downturn in state spending on Medicaid, states are now over the span of a year having to dig themselves completely out of that hole to the point where in state fiscal 2011, despite 9% revenue growth on average at the state level, state tax revenues are still short of where they were in 2008. But Medicaid spending has far outstripped where it was in 2008. And so we have a 4+ year period, and of course the duration depends on the state, where governors are looking at all the things they got elected to do, like education and roads and bridges and build prisons and all the things they love. You're supposed to laugh. And they have less money than they had. Am I going to have to do that every time? Anyway, they have less money than they had 4 years ago to do the things that their citizens have been calling out for. Meanwhile, local revenue growth has been falling for 7 years, and in the last couple of years it's actually started to decline. It significantly lagged the broader economic downturn. And of course, a lot of what states are doing is trying to backfill for lost local revenue. So if you're a Martian, you say, great, ACA, this is exactly what states have been looking for. If you're a governor, you say, holy crap, this isn't what I got elected to do. And that's my first tweet. Okay, tweet number 2. At NASHB, we love all our states equally, but there have always been leading and lagging states, and this time is no different. So, of course, you look out and you say, God, what is wrong with all those states that don't want to do this? But we've seen this before. Whenever we look at a potential option of federal policy, we see some states go first, some states hang around the middle, some states catch up slowly, some never get there. We can all tell the story. Well, I can tell the stories. I don't know if you've heard them all, but you probably have. Hawaii led us with the employer mandate. Massachusetts, health reform round 1, not so successful. Now we're in round 2. Washington, basic health. Minnesota, care. Maine's Dirigo. Maryland's rate setting, the last holdout. 10 care. It can even happen in the South. Vermont. Need I say more? Oregon, we should have the governor here. The point is that we have lots of experience with states titrating, with some of them moving forward and embracing the opportunities and some of them hanging back and waiting to see how it goes. This isn't just the case with broad coverage expansions. It's true with even Medicaid options. And so while we see this divergence around the country in how states are responding, the notion that there's divergence is not exactly news. And so we shouldn't be shocked that we have some states moving forward, saying this is what we want to do, other states saying it's not. Tweet number 3. The triple aim is more than 3 times as hard to achieve as a single aim. Now, when I was doing health reform back in the good old days in Colorado and President Clinton was talking about it, I went to a lot of conferences. And you probably did too. And one of the things I could always count on at a conference is that they would have a slide projector. And they would put up a slide, and it would say, cost, quality, access. And some really smart person would stand up here and say, cost, quality, access. We can have 2, but we can't have all 3. How many of you heard this? We can give everyone something lousy, we can make it good, but we can't give it to everybody. That was the mantra. That's not where we are anymore. In those days, it was easy. Democrats focused on access. Republicans focused on cost, and everyone thought quality was great, so we didn't even worry about it. Now, Don Berwick tells us, we've got 3 aims. It's not the triple aim anymore. It's the 3-part aim. I love the marketing. Anyway, never mind. So we've got to do all 3. And it's true. We do have to do all 3. And we have a new understanding that in order to achieve really any of those goals, we have to achieve all 3. We can't have high quality if everyone isn't in. We can't control costs if everyone isn't part of the system. And it does turn out that in many respects, higher quality is lower cost. But there's a problem. When we were all in our own corner, we didn't have to talk to the people who didn't agree with us. But now that we have to solve all 3 problems, you can't say Democrats are over here, Republicans are over here. We're each going to have our own little discussions with ourselves, come up with our answer and push. Now you have to create some consensus that wasn't necessary in the good old days. And that's how people are thinking about health care these days, certainly at the state level. Tweet number 4. I had to squeeze this down really hard. 128 characters isn't very much. No, I don't think there are any verbs in this. Forgive me. Delivery system reform and payment reform. Can't do them nationally, can't do them locally. Need cooperative federalism. It's 128 exactly. I have an exclamation point. You can't tweet the exclamation point. It won't fit. So since we're since we're tweeting, we have to boil everything down to very few words. So I'm going to condense everything I've learned from a lot of smart people about the healthcare system in like 2 minutes. The healthcare system we have is really inefficient. It's inefficient because we have lousy financial incentives. If we want efficiency, we need payment reform. So we have to change the incentives. If you get 2 people in the room, they will agree that we have to change the incentives, but they won't agree on what the incentives are supposed to be. They'll say things like value, not volume, pay for outcomes, pay for performance, pay for quality. They will be thinking completely different things as they say those words. That's where we are in delivery system reform and payment reform. We are at this stage where we know we need to do it, but we have not developed the operational capacity to do it. The federal government can't do it. It can't do it. The delivery system is too variable around the country. The sense of what you need, a commitment and a clear set of goals, can't be. We have no one to set national goals. Well, we have people who try, but people mostly ignore them. We are unable as a country to say, this is where we want to go and this is what it's going to take to get there. At the state level, we have people who, in some states, are willing to set goals and make commitment, but they don't have the tools. They can't control financing mechanisms in Medicare. ERISA makes private plans exempt from what the states might want to do. And at both levels, there's a shortage of the most important component to payment reform, which is trust, which is you actually have to sit down with people who deliver care and say, you've made your life thinking you would do things this way, and now we want you to do them this way, and trust us. Trust us. We're going to pay you for quality, and we think of quality exactly the same way you do. Don't worry. You have a successful business model, a successful practice model, a successful organizational financial model. We don't have those things at the national level. I certainly don't want to romanticize and say we have them all at the state level. But we are, as a country, unable to do this nationally. We're unable to do it locally. So it seems to me, in a highly condensed version of what it's going to take to improve the healthcare system, the delivery system, that we have to have cooperative federalism. We have to have federal participation and leadership. We have to have local conversations and trust. We need to build those together. That's what it's going to take to get us there. And of course, it's far more complicated than that, but that's all I can fit in a tweet. Tweet number 5. There are red states and there are blue states. But keep your eyes on the green states. Politics, of course, is what we think about when we think about which states are leading and which are lagging. But in fact, when it comes to the kind of reform that we need, I talked before about trust. You want to know the best way to get trust? Shove a little extra green into the system, and you quickly find that people believe that they are not going to be the ones, when you're cutting costs, who are actually going to have to live with less than they had last go around. It's green, actually, that is the lubricant. It's the necessary ingredient that enables the conversations that are very painful, very hard, very challenging, to actually reach some closure where people can agree we're going to try to get from here to there. So we hopefully all have studied and heard the Massachusetts story. Massachusetts, this round of health reform, was at risk of losing all the federal waiver dollars, and all of a sudden everyone said, oh my God, we can't let that happen. And so we better come up with a plan. And of course, in Massachusetts, the waiver dominates the entire Medicaid program. Oregon, just a couple of weeks ago, got its waiver. I went back and looked at the numbers. And that waiver represents, somewhere between 5 and 10% of the whole Medicaid program in the state. And remember, a lot of Medicaid is long-term care and things that aren't as directly affected by these waivers. In California, big bridge to reform waiver, it's a few percent of the program, add in disproportionate share dollars. The point is, it's not just about political will. It's not just about an activist role for government. It's not just about red and blue. It's about shaking loose some dollars and going back into the community and saying, we've got some resources. Let's see if we can do this a little bit better. And indeed, the movement that I see when I look out in the country around delivery system reform, it's not primarily about ideology, although it certainly plays a role. It's about finding money to make those conversations easier than they would be if all we were saying was we're going to shrink the pie and good luck if you can get a share of it in the new world. Which leads me to tweet number 6, also a little bit long. Delivery system reform may be a necessary, but it certainly is not a sufficient condition for sustainable, comprehensive coverage. So what I'm trying to suggest to you is that as a nation, if we're going to improve the healthcare system, we need this cooperative approach. And indeed, I think efforts to improve how we deliver care and make it more efficient are quite amenable to a cooperative approach. But I'm not so sure that just doing that, and even if we were successful in that we would find ourselves as a nation happily providing universal or near universal coverage. I think often about a comment that the late Jim Mongan said many times. He said, we shouldn't hold the uninsured hostage to our inability to control cost. Look, we've got a cost problem, but we've also got a lot of people who aren't benefiting from this incredible healthcare system. And we shouldn't make them wait and say, oh yeah, we'll get to you when we figure out how to do this for less. we should take the Massachusetts approach, not surprising for Jim, and say we're bringing everyone in and then we're going to figure out how we can make this work. It is a beautiful sentiment. It is a sentiment with which I agree. It is, however, a sentiment that I am not sure everyone agrees with. Or maybe I should say it differently. It's a sentiment that I think many agree with in theory, but when push comes to shove, it doesn't exactly play out that way. And so it's wonderful to think that we as a nation would have cooperative federalism around delivery system reform and payment reform and improving efficiencies, but the notion that we can all just create efficiencies that will lead to comprehensive coverage and a universal system, I think, is unrealistic. Which brings me to tweet number 7. Don't look now, but the Affordable Care Act may be the closest to cooperative federalism we can achieve when it comes to coverage. I often talk about, when I think about where the states are, I often talk about there being 2 conspiracies. So I'm going to let you in on my conspiracies. Of course, if you've heard me speak before, you've heard them before. So you're already in on them. But I don't know how long something can be a conspiracy when you keep talking about it. But so on the one hand, there are all these states and federal officials that are fully bought into the notion that we need to implement the Affordable Care Act. And what they will tell you is that on January 1st, 2014, 32 million people, 33 million people will gain coverage through the Medicaid expansion, through the advanced tax credits, and it's going to be great. And we're ready, and we're going to be ready on January 1st of 2014, and everything's on track, and we're going to make it. They're lying. They're lying. They're lying. It's a hard slog. It's going to be tough. It's not going to be pretty. There are going to be a lot of mistakes. Remember when Part D started on the smartest day? I don't know. When will Congress learn? I know they thought they were going to go to conference. Could you please not start major programs on January 1st? It's a federal holiday. This is not a good day to work through problems. So on January 1st, 2014, it's going to be a mess. It's going to be a mess. I've already told all the reporters, you can write and file your stories now. But we'll get through it. But it's not going as beautifully and smoothly as everyone thinks. There's a lot of questions that states that are eager to do this have that aren't being answered. They're going to be answered late. There are a lot of challenges. But there's a conspiracy of silence that says we're just going to put a good face on it and everything's going great. But there's another conspiracy, and that's the conspiracy of those who oppose the law, who will tell you in their state, we are doing nothing. We know the Supreme Court will overthrow the law. We are not going to waste taxpayer dollars preparing for this unconstitutional thing. And even if the Supreme Court doesn't repeal it, the next president will and the Congress will, and we are going to have nothing to do with this law. And you know what? They're lying too. Because all around the country there are people working on figuring out how to get ready to implement the law. I was at a meeting, I'll talk about it more in a moment, with a person who will not be named from a state that she had blacked out on her name tag. And the first thing she said when she stood up to ask a question was, I am not here, but I have a question. And this is happening all around the country. And I will just say the conspiracies have a conspiracy together, which is that those who support the law don't want to out the people who are working on the law in the dark of night, because they know that they want them to be doing the work, and if they say anything, they'll get pounded down. And similarly, the people who oppose the law know that if they actually have to do this, they're going to have to rely on what they learn from the people who are serious about it. And so it's not just it's a conspiracy of conspiracies. Tweet that. Okay. Anyway, there's a lot more going on than you think. And so, in fact, the Affordable Care Act does have more elements of cooperative federalism than it appears from the outside if you just look at the politics. Tweet number 8. We're going to know a lot more in 2 months, but it has nothing to do with the Supreme Court. So it's not just that the Supreme Court will rule, but we're about to enter what I would call the fourth phase of state response to the Affordable Care Act. In the first phase, we had honest deliberation in state houses around the country about whether it was in the best interest or not for states to implement the law. Should we build an exchange? I don't know. Should we set up a high-risk pool? Should we let the federal government do it? I don't know. There was serious deliberation for the first 6 months. And then in January of 2011, a funny thing happened. Legislators came back to the state houses in their states. Most state legislatures only meet for a couple of months, and they do it at the beginning of the year. And the legislators are far more polarized than the governors, and many of them in every state said, hell no, we won't go. This isn't about what's best or which makes the most. This is, I ran for office saying no to Obamacare, and I am here to do everything I can to block the law. And we stopped in many states what we were doing. And the third phase, after those legislators went home, was a phase of inertia, which has been going on for about a year, which is that the states that are going are still going, and the states that stopped are still stopped. And we have this division. And the question to me is not what does the Supreme Court rule, although obviously I'm as curious as you all are, but to me the real question is what do states do in the wake of the ruling, in particular in the wake of what I naively, Stuart would say, expect to be a favorable ruling, either completely or largely favorable ruling. But in the wake of a ruling, what do those states that have been on the sidelines waiting, do they do? Do they say, well, the Supreme Court's wrong, and now we're going to wait for the election, and then we'll wait for a meteor to hit, and then we'll wait for the aliens to land? Or do they actually say, you know what, I guess this is the law of the land, and it's time to figure out how we're going to do this the best way possible? And that choice will largely determine the feel and the shape of the subsequent actions associated with implementation of the Affordable Care Act. Which leads me to tweet number 9. I only have 10. I promise dinner's coming soon. They told me they won't serve till 8, so it doesn't matter how long I talk. Tweet number 9. If the Affordable Care Act doesn't feel cooperative, wait till you see what comes in its place. I mean, the reality is that as unhappy as many states are with aspects of the law, without it, we don't have a federal, as in joint federal-state partnership structure that we can try, that we have any reason to think will be successful in addressing the needs of the healthcare system. What will we see? Well, we already see it in Washington. We will see spasms of cost containment. Oh my God, the deficit is growing, we need to cut rates, which does nothing helpful to anyone, but it does make some people feel better about the deficit. And then we will see spasms of coverage expansion. Oh my God, there are all these uninsured people. We didn't notice. Let's see if we could do something about it. Let's expand Medicaid. Let's do something. I don't know what it will be. And we will see this oscillation between these two national responses to this problem that are completely in conflict with each other, that leave no room, so far as I can tell, for actually acknowledging the differences around the country. And we will see continuation of the pattern of leaders and laggers that got us here, which is that there will be states that will take advantage of the opportunities, do what they can, and there will be states that will not. It's hard to look at that scenario and say, wow, that's really far more likely to succeed and far more likely to be state-friendly than what we have. So I will close with tweet number 10. It's gratuitous, but it's also dinner time. And it is too short, but tweets always are. And that is, if we want better health, what we really need to do is spend less on health care. I mean, the reality here, and we all know it, and we know it so much we won't say it anymore. We have a grotesquely overexpanded, inefficient health care delivery system, or multiple systems. And we are, since it's an economics conference, and I gave this talk with charts where they gave me PowerPoint. At Grant Makers in Health, I could draw you a beautiful picture, but not here. We are so far under the health production function when it comes to spending on healthcare services that if we could just get on to that production function and shift some of the dollars that we are wasting into things like education and economic development and the other things that we know actually determine people's health outcomes, better living circumstances and the like, far more than the outer tail of hopes and dreams of what the healthcare delivery system can provide, and it can provide wonderful things from the perspective of the health of the people, that would be a far better system to live in. So if we want better health, we need to spend less. And in this funny way, because when you ask Bob Blendon, he'll tell you that when you poll Americans, they think we spend too little on health care. And I always, and all of us wonks go, what's the matter with these people? But somewhere inside of us, we know it. We know that we are destroying our future capacity, our future health in the broadest sense of the word, because we are flushing all this money down the healthcare system's toilet. And because we know it intuitively, states know it too. Governors know it. Those legislators who we love to hate and we love to make fun of, they're normal people. And normal people actually know this stuff. It's all the fancy people who go to places like Princeton and give talks who are unwilling to acknowledge it. But normal people look out there and say, why are we cutting our spending on education, primary education, K-12, higher education, so that we can flush more money down the system that isn't yielding what we know it should be yielding? We know it inherently. What states are lacking is a clear roadmap for how to act upon it. So for me, to you, before you eat your entree, I would just close by saying, from the perspective of cooperative federalism, which I do think is a powerful capacity that we have as a country, we need a coverage framework from the federal government. The states will not give us universal coverage. That's another talk. But I think we all know it. We need a coverage framework from the federal government, but the federal government isn't very good at setting limits. It keeps feeding this inefficient beast. We need the spending discipline that the states and other payers bring, because they are unwilling to let this go on and on and on without any limits. But states are not, one by one, going to get us to universal or even near universal coverage. So that's what we need. We need to harness the capacities of both levels of government, the national framework when it comes to coverage, the state and other payer frustration with the inefficiencies in the system to drive some discipline. Now, this cooperative federalism stuff that we have, it's messy. It's imperfect. It's annoying. We don't all live in Massachusetts or Vermont. Sorry, we don't. It's complex. It's not even particularly equitable. But we didn't exactly start from a position of equity, so we can't use that as a bludgeon against everything that we try to do. In a clean laboratory, we could construct something pure. Some would construct a single payer. Some would construct a perfect competition model. In a clean laboratory, that's what we could do. But in America's laboratory of democracy, what we get is the Affordable Care Act without even going to conference committee. It's not exactly a perfect model of cooperative federalism, but it's trying. And I just came back from a couple of days, it ended today, a meeting that HHS is putting on with states, and most of them are there, and they're trying to figure out to do this together. The ACA is a little heavy on the federal framework. I say that from a state perspective. It's a little light on the spending discipline, and that's certainly one of the greatest risks of the law. But for all of its flaws, it is not only the law of the land, and will continue to be after the Supreme Court issues its ruling, but it's actually a pretty darn good start. And you can tweet that. Thank you very much.